Hello, folks. Today we're going to talk about marijuana. Marijuana. Let's go and have
That's
a
a
bit of
cultural
a deep.
appropriation right there, sir. I have to stop you for that.
Yeah, as a cannabis marijuana. But recently, Trump was talking about, like there's been talks about Trump like changing up marijuana legislation or like how that's scheduled after midterms. I think, it's a very interesting topic, and there's many really opinionated voices on both sides of this issue. And I think this is a definitely like just drug policy in general. That's a particularly interesting area that like a lot of people don't think about. Now, the main talking point with marijuana is, the fans of it will say that it's less bad than drinking, and they'll be like, oh, it's not bad, it's not addictive, there's no harm, and then you get the really crazies, the really far marijuana pro people. He'll say it's like the cure for cancer, and it's like this wonder drug, and the reason it's like illegal is because of some like conspiracy theory to like make it so you can't like it was from the paper industry going back to the 30s. Like I've seen these like left wing conspiracy theories before. But here's the thing: like with marijuana, I think one of the issues with it, and here's a couple like just practical issues, like not philosophical, nothing like that. Philosophically, I think people should have the freedom to do mostly what they want. However, practically, I know that we live in a less than perfect world. We don't like the average IQ. I don't think would be able to go and handle absolute freedom in the country, because you get people who are just dumb and they'll just get addicted to it, because it really does require a high IQ to have high levels of freedom when you think about it.
You gotta
Because
be
if you
big
have people,
brained.
well, like really you do, because if you have like some dummy will just keep like doing drugs and stuff and like having sex and having kids, and they won't think about the future. Like honestly, like, IQ is probably mostly about forward thinking. What are you going to do like 20 years from now? Like how are you going to go and plan your life? It's that sort of like mentality that I think creates higher IQ individuals. But anyways, back to marijuana policy. Like one of the major issues I personally see with it would be, like with the vehicles. I think that's definitely, like a high driving, and there's not a lot of research into this. But it's like really hard to go and test like how much marijuana you have in your blood, because like I've heard stories that like if you smoke like weed once, it might not even be in your system. You can be high as heck. But if you like smoke weed, like you're like smoking weed every day, like Snoop Dogg, and you don't even smoke weed that day and you go driving, there'll be so much weed like left over within your system that when you get tested, even if you're completely stone sober, you'll still be like given enough that they would think you did DUI. And I think that's a major issue is with dealing with cars and that sort of thing. Like, how do you really tell when someone's like high or not? And it's just such a strange plant too. And like another issue that I have with marijuana legalization is like how will that affect us in terms of just like people being lazy? Like I don't want to sound like just thinking that everyone's like lazy who does weed, but like I know a lot of people who do smoke weed, and they just a lot of people, it's not like cocaine where it's a stimulant. It's like the opposite. It's like if you have someone who's like just a day drinker, it's like it's kind of like a depressant. Like it just makes people kind of like want to sit back and watch Rick and Morty all day. Like not everyone obviously, but like even when Elon Musk got on the air and he smoked weed, and like Joe Rogan was like, yeah, I can see why someone like you probably won like weeks. Like Elon Musk was always thinking on his feet. And if we kind of have this like culture and everyone's just smoking weed, it's kind of going to be a problem, I think. Now, on the other hand, I think that enforcement, and one other major problem too is the obesity problem in the United States, and I don't think that legalizing marijuana is going to help that at all. Like, because the munchies isn't just some meme. Like, I know people who smoke weed, and they'll just like eat like Tostitos and like pizza pockets, and they'll just like gobble up food and gain weight and just like not want to do things. That's going to increase the obesity epidemic. And along with that, you'll get I think more younger people start doing it as well to a certain extent. And there's a lot of really like see if you're just like the average stoner, like you smoke weed like maybe once a week. I don't think that's a big issue, but like you get people who will take it to the extreme. They'll smoke weed every day, and that there's been a lot of research into like mental disorders and people who are like constant stoners. Now, I think alcohol has similar issues if you're drinking liquor every day, but people know the dangers with that. You get these like these radical, marijuana enthusiasts who say that, you could smoke it every day and that kills free radicals or something. It's healthy for you. No, I don't think it's healthy for you. I mean, like at the best case, I think it might be helpful for people. Like, there's definitely medical uses for it, and I think that there's very low reason why not to have it legalized from medical, like at least for medical usage. Because we have legalized opium right now, we have legalized
Mm.
cocaine for medical. Like, you can get a prescription like cocaine if you really want to. Now, it won't be in the powder form; it'll probably be in a pill. But you can get like morphine, cocaine, heroin, all like fentanyl. That's why it was originally used for, is for kids with cancer to go and lick a lollipop with fentanyl in it, so they don't have to deal with the injections. But for like recreational use, I just think there's going to be some major issues with that. And like, see, my problem with like drugs, like honestly, I would like to see it where we would have the ability for people to go and do pretty much whatever drug they want. However, I do recognize that there's a major issue with that. Philosophically, I'd want it to happen, but you just have people, like let's say we legalize all drugs. You got people just shooting up heroin, left and right. And now people, there's an argument to be said about that, it's better than them using it off the street. But I don't think, just providing it's a very good solution either, because that's all that everyone will want to do. It's an addiction. Like, people say that marijuana is not addicting, but what they mean is it's not addicting in the classical sense, like with heroin, where if you don't do heroin, like after you've been doing it for like a month or so, like straight, you're going to have withdrawal symptoms. Now, marijuana doesn't really have any withdrawal symptoms, but it's psychologically addicting. It's like a compulsion. It's like, alcohol. There's people who are like consistent alcoholics. Now, that might have a little bit of withdrawal symptoms, but like, gambling, there's people who are addicted to gambling. There's people who are addicted to video games, sex, porn, masturbation. There's a lot of things that people can be addicted to, and it doesn't have to have withdrawal. Now, and that's a very strong aspect to it. Like, I've known many people who just go down this path. Now, that could be, one could go and argue that's because it's illegal right now, that they start associating with drug dealers and they get into harder stuff because they're already around, the sort of environment where you get a lot of like, like if you have a drug dealer, they might not just deal in marijuana. Like if it's an illegal drug dealer, if it's legal, then yeah, they'll just deal with marijuana or, like a smoke shop or head shop. But if it's an illegal drug dealer right now, the issue is, you start talking to them and they're like, oh, we'll smoke. I sell weed, but I also sell, Oxycontin or like Percocet or whatever else they want to sell. But like, it just, when you're in that environment, the rules are different. It's less judgy. It's like with the furries. And you think about it, like the furries, when they're in their environment, they think it's okay. Bobby's a furry, and Joe's also a furry, but he likes to have sex with animals. So that's how that's kind of like, that's why there's 20% of furries who are into banging animals. And I think there's a similar kind of situation with drug use, with marijuana, when you're around like illegally right now. And I think that would stop that. But on the other hand, you would have people, a lot of people, especially once first legalized, who'll just start like constantly using it. And we need to go and have like some sort of a public service announcement saying that, look, there's real dangers to this. It's not just like some wonder drug. And the people who say it's a wonder drug need to be taken to court, because it's obviously not. Like, if you have like back in the day, they took like big tobacco to court for saying that, cigarettes, 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Camel cigarettes. They got taken to court over those BS claims. I think they need to start doing that with marijuana. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to first start with a disclaimer. I am, straightest to straight edges. I've never drank any alcohol. I've never done any illegal drug. I've never, what are all the other bad things? Smokes, yes, smokes. I've never done them, so I start to forget about them in many ways.
I drank coffee once.
Yeah, the edgiest thing I've ever done was drank coffee like 3 times, and I don't like it. And I don't like soda either. I know I'm very weird. Okay, I'm getting that out there. But I don't like a lot of these things because I've seen what they do to people. And a simple way to put it is the pleasure comes first, the pain comes later. That is a simple way to put the side effects of smoking, drinking, and drugs. And that's why I've never done them, and I've stayed away from them. Now, how do I feel philosophically? Philosophically, in an ideal, utopian, libertarian paradise, everybody would be allowed to do any drug they want. All drugs would be legal. You'd allowed to do whatever you want, whenever you want, within some reason, I guess. But ideally, all drugs should be legal. But in the real world, not the utopian world, I don't know if that's practical in any regard, or how far it can be practical, I should say. Because I'm going to agree with a lot of what you say, maybe repeat it, but I'll put it through my filter. When people, I'm open on this topic, just to preface, I'm very open on it. I don't have a solid stance. I think you probably have more of a stance than me. It's very complex, for me. I'm pretty cut and dry on most issues, but this one I'm not. And a lot of the common arguments you'll hear, from the left are, well, alcohol is legal and it's way worse than marijuana. Well, I don't like that argument because these are really not comparable things. Alcohol, you can take a few sips and nothing happens to you. With marijuana, just on one hit, you're already going to feel some effect. Just one hit. I mean, of course, it depends on the potency, blah, 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 the quality of marijuana, yeah. But basically, this, marijuana, just taking any dose of it has an effect on you. Would I'll let you interject for a second. Would you say I'm right on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I agree 100% with that. And like that's another thing I kind of forgot to mention. It's like you can't and some people too. It's just too much. It's like a Pandora's box when you have people smoking marijuana. Some people can handle it very good and they have a high tolerance to it. They could smoke a whole joint or a bowl. They'll be perfectly fine, to drive. But then you have other people out there, who will you have one you do one toke and then they're completely blasted, and I wouldn't trust them anywhere near a moving vehicle. It's just very difficult to determine those things.
Exactly, and that's the same with alcohol and a bunch of other things that well, what I mean is that let me draw back. What I mean is that your mileage will vary. Like some people can have 10 drinks and they'll be totally shit-faced wasted. Other people, they'll be fine. But marijuana kicks in quicker, though. I think we can agree on that.
Well, yeah, I agree marijuana kicks in quicker, but with alcohol, it's a lot more of a science. Marijuana is almost like an art. I guess you could say it's kind of very more subjective to each person's individual experience and individual strain.
Yeah.
And when you have one shot of liquor, you can look online. They have things that tell you your blood alcohol percentage. It's down to a science because we've had it for years.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like that with marijuana. You can't go and tell if you're too drunk to go and drive because you don't have a little breathalyzer. You don't have a little mathematical formulas, because you can take it for alcohol by your body how big you are. If you weigh 200 pounds and it's not exactly perfect, but it's pretty damn good. If you're 200 pounds and you have one drink and that's either a beer or a shot or a glass of wine, then you'll be fine. But if you're you have 4 of those, then you're going to have a problem. But with marijuana, there's none of that.
Yeah. And to continue on my previous point, which is, these things, alcohol is way worse. I would tend to argue that in terms of short-term effects, short-term, you have a few drinks or you have one drink. I mean, I know I'm throwing these arbitrary numbers out there, but you don't have much alcohol, nothing's going to really happen to you. If you have a little bit of marijuana, something's going to happen to you. You're going to have side effects. Now, what are the bad things with marijuana? Common symptom or side effects of marijuana that I've seen in people, these are common symptoms. It's not just anecdotal. It's paranoia, laziness, and sometimes even I would say stupidity. I know that's a subjective term anyways, but people when they start smoking weed can get very lazy, lackadaisical, and get dumb, and not, it's not like an alcoholic, you get that slurred speech, but they kind of just get a little, they're not thinking straight. Because it's a mind-altering drug. It's got THC. It fucks with your mind. And paranoia. One of my friends, remember, was took a few hits from weed. He was pretty paranoid from it, and I could tell. Like I would just make some like jokes, and he'd get all like on edge about it. I was like, dude, I'm just joking. And I realized, oh, that's paranoia kicking in. Um, but I'm using anecdotal stuff here. This isn't
Well,
like
yeah. Well, here's the thing with the paranoia. Like, that's a little bit more subjective. Some people could be paranoid. Some people could be like the exact opposite. They're just like, oh, okay, whatever. They'll be like the most calmest people you ever know. But that's really dependent on the strain of marijuana and the person taking it. Like,
yeah.
it's just difficult. Like, it's not really. You don't know, but they'll have something most likely, unless they're like a super stoner. They're like been smoking weed since they were in 7th grade.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. When they compare alcohol and marijuana, alcohol is a liquid. Okay, you drink it, you swallow it, boom, it's down. With marijuana, if you're inhaling, which you gotta do to get the effect of it, I guess.
You could eat it.
What was that? Oh
They
yeah,
have edibles.
yeah, that's true. You can eat it, but I'm reading this thing here on the NIDA, National Institute of Drug Abuse, and it's talking about the short-term effects. And it says that THC quickly passes through the lungs into the bloodstream, and then it carries all that to the brain. Now, I'm just guessing on this here, like this isn't exact science, but I just have a feeling that marijuana gets to your brain quicker, and I think that's why it has these effects, because you're inhaling it through a smoke or whatever. But to me, just inhaling a smoke has got to be worse than swallowing a liquid. I mean, it just makes sense to me. Inhaling smoke is bad for your lungs to begin with, so.
Well, they do have, there are methods, like in PA, if you have medical, you can't smoke it. You can either, vape it, or you could go and, eat something or drink a tincture with, cannabinoids in there.
Yeah.
But, that it'll still mess you up, a lot. It's just more of a Pandora's box. But, see, my thing with marijuana, though, the one good, of all the drugs out there, and there's a lot of drugs, some of them have potential for a lot of, interesting things, a lot of, philosophers and very smart people, who's that famous psychologist, Sigmund Freud? He used cocaine a lot, and the guy who, and he did pretty good work, I think. He's still referenced, say, at a psychology course.
Some of it might be a little BS.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's, for the time, it was more than what anyone else came up with. But not just him, there's a bunch of other people who did, recreationally use cocaine. And then there was, the guy who invented the double helix structure of the DNA molecules was he was an acid taker. A lot of people in Silicon Valley do that. But, I mean, I think those drugs have a lot more, it just has a lot, it's a different sort of drug. And, marijuana, I feel, does the exact opposite. It inhibits a lot of people, makes them kind of lazy. But, not everyone. Sometimes it's good to go and have, a nice little break from things. But, I feel that for society as a whole, it wouldn't have as much of a benefit. However, I do think at this point, the die's already cast. We already saw it happen with Colorado, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Marijuana, it's going to be legalized regardless of, what we do. However, I think in general, my idea for, I think we very well could actually have, let people do more or less whatever drugs they want. However, I'd have a special situation with that, and it's a little bit of a different solution to this problem. But let's say maybe this would be used for marijuana, maybe not. Maybe be used for harder drugs like heroin or some of the more mind altering ones like cocaine or maybe even acid. You could go and have the doctor. You'd have to go to the doctor and ask to be put on this drug, and they'd go and have a therapist. They check your vital signs and make sure you don't have any history of mental illness or drug abuse. And they go and give it to you. They go and give you one dose of whatever drug you're trying to go do. So they could give you cocaine. Then they go and examine you while you're under the effects of cocaine. If it's not anything particularly bad, they'll give you a small dose, and they'll drug test you after that to make sure that you haven't been for the first month or so. You'll go back a month later, and they'll drug test you to make sure that you're not abusing it excessively. You're only taking the amount that you've been prescribed. And then they go and kind of keep an eye on you. And this can be done via, computers. They go and set up a system, and they'll go and look at your credit score, and they'll go and make sure that you're employed. they'd have something on there to make sure that you're like not wasting all your money on drugs. It'd be hooked up to your computer. And if anyone has an issue with it, like, if you have a spouse or your family notices that you're starting to act bizarrely, they go and be able to go and take the drug away from you. And I think, this would be a lot more involved in there, but I think this would enable a lot more freedom to be had. It would be like kind of a, like a situation where you can go and do the drug, but they'll also make sure that you're not going to go and like destroy yourself and your family at the same time. It'd be like this kind of halfway solution where you could do whatever drug you want. Like, you could be given like heroin if you really wanted to, but they'd go and monitor you. And if you had any issues where they notice that you're like developing a dependency on it, you take it more than you should, and they'll like periodically, I guess. I mean, it depends on the drug, really. Like with heroin, yeah, I guess they'd probably have to do that. But for other drugs, it'd be more or less, they'd be passive. They just check on your financial status. They'll make sure that you're still like gainfully employed. And if you have any issues, then they can just go and take you off the drug, and then they put like a little mark on your record and say you can't do the drug anymore.
Well, here's the problem with that: is these people become addicted, and once you can't just take the drugs away, and they're not going to do them. They're going to go through black markets like they do now, get them, and they're just going to keep getting addicted. And it's going to be an endless spiral. But before we deep dive into that, I want to finish what I was saying about the effects of it. The one thing I think we can actually, maybe, I know how dare we have this in today's world, find common ground on something, but maybe we can have common ground on this, which is, I don't think we should allow marijuana for anybody between, that's under the age of at least 18, because your brain is developing, and marijuana, or any drug, including alcohol, on a brain that's less than 18 is going to have bad effects, because you're changing how you're thinking, your mind altering, and it's going to impair thinking, it's going to impair memory, and all kinds of stuff. Like, there have been studies done to prove that. I think that's a common ground thing.
Yeah. I agree with that. Like, see, the only issue I'd have, and then be, for recreational use, I agree. If you have a medical necessity, like there's people with, issues, then yeah, I think they could be prescribed. However, the doctors see fit, since they prescribe, fentanyl to 8-year-olds who are like cancer patients.
That was going to be my next segue, which is, I think the other common ground we can have is medical marijuana is perfectly fine. I think as long as the doctor prescribes it and it's regulated, so people aren't, doing like they do with the opioids, which is they can get it on Medicaid for cheap and then sell it on the streets, shit like that. As long as it's well regulated and it's prescribed and it's controlled, I think medical marijuana is fine, because it helps people.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that'd be two areas of common ground with most people would probably agree with that.
And I don't want people to conflate the Joe Rogan-esque sort of argument of, oh, marijuana, cures cancer, bro. Yeah, I know he doesn't say that, but like that's the people, like some potheads literally argue that it cures cancer. No, it fucking doesn't. Like, it's not this miracle drug that cures every disease. But back to my whole stance on this issue. So philosophically, like I said, I believe you can do whatever you want, but I don't know if that's practical here, because at the same time, I do think you should be able to do whatever you want to your body, no matter how fucked up it is. It's your body, your choice. I know it's like a pro-choicer now. But I think the problem I have, and it's the same problem with alcohol or any drug really, is that, you can do whatever you want as long as you're not harming other people. With alcohol, you can get drunk, get in a car, and kill people. Drunk drivers kill a lot of people. I hate drunk drivers, and I hate drunks in general, because they can go off and do these things without really being fully in control of their body. Now, with alcohol, at least you can have a drink or 2 or 3 or whatever, and it probably won't affect you. But with weed, boom, you're already affected once you take one puff. Now, is it dangerous? Like you said, it depends on the person. That's where it's kind of difficult. But, I just have a lot of problems, mostly with, getting around to supporting any weed legalization, is because really the activists, the pot activists, are annoying. They're really just annoying people, and I explain why with their common arguments. But I think you are right that the battle... Yeah, they are NPCs. They are peak NPC, and I think the battle has been lost. I think, within 10, 20 years, you're going to see nationwide legalization. And what I mean by that is maybe not the government makes a law or something, but basically, no matter where you are in America, weed is going to be legal. I think that's what's going to happen. Um,
I,
I don't know
I
how quickly or how, but it's going to happen.
I think it's to be closer than that. I mean, I think that within the next 4 years, like federally, it's going to be like rescheduled to something less than what it is right now, and then probably within like 5-10 years, he'll be like legalized recreationally most everywhere. I mean, I think it's coming soon.
I think, though, I'll add, though, I think also if it's going to be decriminalized or legalized or whatever, I hope well, actually, I don't want to say decriminalized. If it is legalized, the one thing I do hope is that there are very harsher penalties for driving under the influence with not only alcohol but marijuana and anything else. I don't know if that's going to deter people, but I just think that should be something you should definitely have as harsher penalties for people that drive under the influence of any drug.
Well, honestly, I think that's going to become a moot point in like the next 10 years, anyways, because I see that self-driving cars are probably going to become more prevalent.
Yeah,
I think
that's true.
gonna
That's
start.
true. And
Like,
that's where I
that's
think
gonna start
legalization
fixing
will
it.
happen quicker is because of this rise in technology.
Because that's like the major issue with that. But I think, back to the thing I said, like, do you have any other points on this section?
I'm trying to think of the other like stuff we were talking about before we started recording. Um, oh, the one thing I will mention is that when people say, "Oh, nobody has driven under the influence of marijuana and killed anybody," well, part of the thing, like they can detect marijuana in your system, I think, but a lot of the statistics were, I think, done at. I don't, people fact check me on this, but I think there was something I saw in the video where it said like a lot of these statistics were done where cops really can't. Oh, that's what it is. Cops can't test you for being under the influence of marijuana unless they get a warrant or something. They have to do something special to get that, and that's why these statistics are kind of off. And they don't have, a lot of people that have been under the influence of it while driving. So I think you're going to see an increase in like car accidents and crime and a bunch of other things when it gets legalized, which I think is what happened in Colorado. There's a bunch of accidents increase, but at the same time, the drug legalization activists will say, well, it decreases crime. It's like, well, yeah, no shit, because it's not illegal anymore. There are benefits and drawbacks for it being legalized, but I overall I don't really know if it's good or bad. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. But, now to the second thing I want to go and talk about, like actual solutions. I do think that like a sort of medical situation, like prescribing the ability for you to take a drug recreationally, I think that would have definite positives. Now, I mean, it'd be easier for things like like mushrooms or LSD because like you don't like the addiction isn't there like it is for like harder drugs. Like it's more it's completely psychological with like the hallucinogens. Like if you take like one of those like LSD or something, you don't get physically addicted to it. Like there's actually, if you take another thing of LSD after you take one, it's significantly less effective. Like they have a forget the name of it, but like it's kind of like a natural like a solution. Like you have to go and take double the dose to get the same pleasure of LSD. But like, and then I think mushrooms have a similar sort of thing with these psychedelics. I think that would probably have a better situation with the legal, like the sort of medical prescribed solution. I think marijuana would be like prescribed recreationally. I think that would be suitable. But I think at this point there's enough momentum where you won't even like need to go through that step first, because most people would be able to get a deal with it. Now, I mean, I agree with your earlier comment about like for like if they let you use cocaine or opiates, like things that are actually addictive, then they might end up becoming addicted to it. However, my counter argument to that would be like, if they see you starting to get addicted, they just come through to like, they'd be able to catch it a lot earlier on because they're monitoring you. Those would be a lot more hard to get into it. Like you couldn't be like some poor guy like to get prescribed it. So you'd have to be financially stable. That'd be one of the requirements because if you're poor, you have a lot less distance to fall to hit rock bottom.
Mhm.
But like you won't have to be like necessarily rich, but you'd have to go and prove that you're financially stable. You'd have to be probably like 21 or maybe even higher than that to go and get the prescription to recreationally take these drugs. And I think that would be like a good midway solution to complete legalization. I think at some point that'd be ideal, but given I think you need a high IQ society to be able to handle that freedom. I think that'd work for now.
Yeah, that's what's tricky. Is that I'm afraid society literally cannot handle it. It's like giving a kid a race car. He's gonna crash it because he's a kid. He's not responsible, and I think that's the problem with people is that they're too irresponsible. And that's why I never want to do drugs or never want to do alcohol because I view it as something that's very irresponsible. It's like, yeah, you may be having a good time, in your head, but what are you doing to other people? There's a risk involved. You're not in control fully of your body or your mind. And I view that as dangerous, and not only that, it's unhealthy because there's been studies done. There's a recent one done recently about how alcohol, no matter how much you have, is unhealthy and damaging to your body. To what degree? I mean, the study gets into that, but same with marijuana. I believe it's damaging to you. There's some studies that back it up. Maybe not as much. Like when you do it like every day, that's going to be really bad. Like if you do it once a week, it's probably not going to be as bad. I don't know, but I just don't like this argument also that you hear from people, especially on the left. They're just like, oh, marijuana is natural. I'm like, yeah, so is ricin. Okay, just because it's natural doesn't mean it's automatically good for you. There's a lot of natural things that are awful, terrible, can kill you, like fucking ricin. Okay.
Yeah, poppy's a plant. You can find like poppies out there, and you can die from opiate overdose if you go and take the latex from that. Like I hate that argument as well.
Yeah.
But like it's like, oh, you're going to illegalize the plant. Well, like it's more than just that.
Yeah, it's not just a plant.
You can be legalized for numbers if you think about it, because if someone sends you an inappropriate image of a child on the computer, when you think about what that is, all it is a bunch of numbers stringed together.
Yeah.
You could be sent to jail over numbers. So that's an argument too against marijuana, against marijuana legalization. It's it's just it's a plant, but that it doesn't mean anything. Like there are tons of things that are illegal patently.
Yeah, and the last. Oh, sorry, I'll let you finish. I got one more thing to finish.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. Last point I want, because I'm trying to remember these things, so I'll sometimes get a little excited and ahead of myself. But last thing I want to say is, because I'm going to get into some solutions, is that when people say that marijuana is not addictive, like you said, that's BS, and I agree with you. And I've just had this sort of revelation over the past few days. When people that are just casual drinkers will say, alcohol is not addictive. It can be for certain people like alcoholics. They have to drink. It's for whatever reason, if it's escapism to make them feel good, whatever, they cannot stop drinking. Or cocaine or heroin. These people are addicts and they have to have it to literally keep moving in the day. Like I remember seeing this thing on National Geographic of a guy that was addicted to heroin that lived in the city, and he'd walk around every day on the streets in the city looking for needles. He'd be scourging the streets for needles to juice up because he needed it that badly, and he was dirt poor. He didn't have any money. He was dirty and disgusting, and that's why. It's because it's addicting. It's all you're doing is spending your time and money on stupid shit. But when people say marijuana is addictive, I've grown to really not like that. And same with alcohol, because if it's not addictive, if you cannot be addicted to it, why are you still doing it? The people that tell me it's not addictive are still doing it. Like at college, people. Sorry, I'm dying. It's not because I smoked weed. People at college go out drinking every week. Every weekend, they're out drinking. Okay, you get a certain high of it, not the literal high from like a drug or something. Maybe it is, I don't know, but that's not my point. You get a pleasure out of it
that you want to keep doing it. That's the definition of addiction. Marijuana is addicting, and so is alcohol. So are fucking video games, Oreos, milk. It's addicting because you like it and you want more of it. I just don't, like this concept. My point here really is I don't like how the debate is being framed. And I think what we're trying to do, we're doing a better job at, is framing the debate in a more honest way, where we're not really picking a side here so hard, like Joe Rogan, like, oh, weed's going to cure cancer, or, some Christian priest, Puritan, that's like, oh, marijuana is the worst drug in the world and it's evil and kills everyone. Those are two really stupid extremes. But in terms of solutions, I think, like I said, no matter what happens, I think it's going to get, no matter where you are in America, you're going to be allowed to do it. I think the best way to do it is leave up to the states. It's not in the Constitution, leave up to the states. Okay, we're going to make our libertarians happy and our Republicans kind of happy with that. So what are the states going to do? They're going to try it out. Is it working well? Okay. Are there big problems? Okay, well, we'll move on from there. And like anything, you put it in the states, you see how it works, and then it moves on and maybe goes into another state. That's what happened with gay marriage. Then the Supreme Court ruled on it. Doesn't matter your stance on that, but my point is that when it was tried in states, then you got a sense of how it's going to work. And I think that's the best way to do it, is just try in states, see what happens. But I think the bigger implication, philosophically, legally aside, is what is the cultural implications of this? And this is where I have a problem. If we legalize it, we're basically saying it's okay to do it. Is it really okay to do this? In my opinion, no. I don't think you should do it. Do I think you should not be allowed to do it? That's a different discussion. But I think the problem we're going to have now is we're going to form a culture of weed is cool, weed is okay by legalizing it. Is that going to, turn, 16, 18-year-olds into, coke addicts overnight? No. But it's going to make things more, like I said, okay to do. And I have problems with that. But at the same time, when something's illegal and people are telling you not to do it, people are more enticed to do it. So what do? The best thing really to do is to form a culture of that marijuana sucks. Marijuana is bad. Marijuana is not good for you. That's what you really need to form. Now, how do you do that? I don't know. It's got to be through the media. It's got to be through schools. It's got to be done in a fun, entertaining, cultural way. But our culture in movies, in video games, in everything has pushed this idea that weed is cool, it's great to get high, it's a good time with your friends, and I don't see how that's going to really change. I'm not going to be a pessimist and say it can't change, but I'm just saying that there are problems in our culture that it's not going to get, better, really.
Yeah, I think that the problem with marijuana is the pot culture is definitely an issue, because that's like all that they base their lives around, and I think it's something that we're going to have to go and deal with. But I think that battle at this point is already over. Now for the future of drug legalization, and which I think is a more pressing matter with this issue, because that's going to happen. Is I think that we have to go and create a system where we can kind of like test drug, like where things be tested, where we can go and like have more research onto it. I think we should in general like change the scheduling system so that people reschedule a bunch of old drugs, because I think that like a lot of drugs have a lot of potential uses that are good, but they're not allowed to have any research into them, like the Schedule 1, like LSD, mushrooms, DMT. They all have very high potential uses for like psychotherapists, for people who have PTSD. Like they actually have medical benefits to it as well. Like it's not like it's so much like you might have with marijuana, but there's a lot of really important psychological things, especially since like society in general, they seem to become psychologically, I don't want to say weak, but psychologically weak. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's definitely some uses there, and that's why I think we need to go and change the schedule for those drugs. Like heroin and stuff can stay where they are for now. But I think that for the psychedelics, they need to be looked at. And I think that weed is going to be the gateway drug to legalizing those drugs, which I think is a good thing. But I think psychedelics, that they probably deserve their own episode, because that's a whole other issue with those particular drugs. However, I think the weed will have a very important impact on that. but I do think that there's going to have to be some solutions for driving, and they need to go and come up with it quick because they're going to go like legalize it. Like maybe they're gonna, and like it's really hard too because like a lot of these tests that they have, like field sobriety tests, like those can, like people can fail those and be perfectly fine. Like they could not be taking any drugs and fail the sobriety tests. There's a lot of subjective issues. They need to go and revamp them. Maybe like have some researchers figure out a way to go and like determine how much, like if you're actually intoxicated by weed or not. Like they need to go and do a lot more research into that, and they need to do it fast.
Yeah.
Because the current situation, like they have like field tests for weed, but the problem is if like you smoked weed last week and you didn't smoke any today and you're like a heavy stoner, like you're gonna end up being screwed over. And on the other hand, you could be high and driving and you put your stuff in your eyes and they look fine and they're not gonna notice anything, and you might not test for very high with weed. Like that's the most significant issue I see right now, and that needs to be addressed. I mean, the self-driving vehicles and Uber will help mitigate that, and self-driving vehicles will probably just get rid of that problem entirely when they get to the point where you can use them a lot. Now, in rural areas, that's going to be a problem because I have a feeling that self-driving vehicles aren't going to do as well there, just because there's not enough people to go and map them out like as much as we would like. Like if you've seen some of these like backwoods places, it's very difficult like for Google Maps to even have the right address. Like,
exactly.
I've been to West Virginia before. Like my one ex-girlfriend's like aunt's house was not even on Google Maps. Like it wasn't on Google. Like when I tried to navigate there, it wasn't on there. And like these sort of places, it's going to be really difficult to deal with, self-driving cars. So that's going to be a problem. You might have a lot more like weed and like drug, DUIs, drug under influence or whatever they call it. Driving under the influence of drugs, and that's going to be a problem. And other than that, just in general society needs to go and figure out a way to go and like stop telling people it's perfectly good to go and take drugs. It's not like any, like at least like most substances, if your body doesn't have it originally and it's not like prescribed to you medically, you really have no reason to be taking it. Like any sort of like psychoactive substance, like it's not really going to do anything good for your body. Just again, recreationally take drugs, and I would say possibly with the exception of some actual psychedelics, but that's that's going to be a whole nother discussion. But in general, it's not really a good thing to start taking a drug if you're not prescribed it.
Yeah.
Whether that be alcohol, nicotine, ketamine, heroin, marijuana. I don't think it's going to make you a better person for smoking weed unless you have a medical issue. Now, I think it might help you relax a little bit. It might help you get some sleep if you're insomniac, but it's, there's a lot of downsides to it. And they just don't talk about those. Like there's a whole lot of issues with just people taking these drugs, and they don't even think about it. Like honestly, I think that makes a lot of the NPC people out there because they just kind of like it dumbs life down to a certain extent.
It's like, remember when Alex Jones was saying in his custody hearing, he's like, I just smoke weed on Joe Rogan's podcast. I just do it once a year, test the potency. See, George Soros is cranking it up. As comical as that is, like that is becoming an issue that you're tapping into. So weed's becoming more higher in potency, and they've jacked it up. For whatever reason, I guess because it's selling better. Everybody wants a higher high. Once you have one high, you want more, and I think that's going to become a problem. Maybe through legalization, that'll get regulated, and that won't be as big as a problem. But you're having weed becoming so potent that people are basically getting more dangerous weed. And having more negative effects on. But I do agree that we need to reform the police and all these other systems on how to detect weed, how to, maybe they'll need new breathalyzers check for weed. I don't know if they can do it now. I'm just speaking out my ass here. But, we need to make sure we're prepared for this as a society because, the other reason I've noticed that the battle is already lost is that you just literally look around you. We have stores that sell beer. We have stores that sell alcohol. We have stores they're just made for beer. We have wineries. We have all this stuff. But slowly we're seeing pot farms. We're seeing marijuana dispensaries. We're seeing pot stores. we're seeing these things everywhere. So in other words, it's becoming more culturally accepted. It's becoming more ingrained in our culture that it's like, I think in like 20 years, we're going to look back and be like, kids that are born there are going to think it was crazy that marijuana was illegal. It's kind of like how we thought in Prohibition that it was crazy. Now, I don't want to draw that parallel too hard because, when Prohibition happened and people got all angry, it's because alcohol was a very, socially and culturally accepted thing. I think marijuana is going to take a long time to get to that level. I mean, it's going to take, hundreds of years, to be honest. But what I'm saying is quickly, it's going to, take a, definitely more dramatic effect. It's going to be more accepted, which, like I said, out of all the drugs, it's like it's not, it's definitely the least worst in many ways. But, it's not this golden cure cancer, it's a perfectly fine thing. I just hate how it gets framed that way. But I would also say that the other thing that we can do solution wise is make sure that when it does get everywhere, when it is pretty much legal, I know I'm a small government guy, but we got to make sure it's regulated well, because we don't want to, in my view, make a bad situation worse. I don't, well, it's not really the worst situation in the world. It really isn't that bad. I mean, I don't think it's going to be that bad on society, but I think it's going to have a cultural sort of just dumbing down. And I think also you need to, with the autonomous cars will definitely help big time with making it more, less of an issue for the, because everybody points to that example of, oh, well, if you get in your car and you drive high, you're going to kill somebody. That's not going to be much of an issue anymore. And I think that's where legalization becomes more possible.
I agree. And here's one more thing I found recently that I completely forgot about, because it's like been a relatively new phenomenon as marijuana culture is extended. They have something called cannabinoid hypermesis syndrome, and it's basically where like people just start like vomiting uncontrollably and like demanding to go and take hot showers. After,
Oh, you better not do that, Penn State. You don't want to go in the showers here.
But the issue, it's like mostly with people who are long-term, marijuana usage, and they'll end up like just having like severe nausea and vomiting, and then like it causes it's a medical emergency, and people have like gone to the hospital for this. And I mean, it's not deadly or anything. I mean, some of the effects I think it might lead to some sort of like a damage because of the vomiting and whatnot. Well, that's another issue too, which it's a completely new disorder that just became around because of probably high potency marijuana usage. But as things get regulated and people learn the risks, I mean, alcohol has these issues too if you drink too much, obviously. So I think that's not as big of a deal. But I think in general we need to go and start like going away from even for like alcohol. We can just go and like start trying to go and limit ourselves with how much we do. Like if you use it like every so often, it's fine. But like I think if you're chemically dependent on anything, that's just bad, and that's kind of where I feel and where I stand with that. Now I think that like 10 years ago I would have said that the medical the prescription for recreational use would be useful for marijuana, but at this point it's the die's already been cast. Like I said before, it's going to happen whether we like it or not. And I think it's not that big of a deal in my honest opinion. Of all the drugs out there, marijuana is not the most dangerous. Although I do feel that there's definitely some risks with it. But I would like to go and see more legalization in terms of traditional hallucinogenic drugs like the like the LSDs and the mushrooms and stuff. But and marijuana at least will lead to that, and that's I think what we're gonna see next. There'll probably be mushrooms first, and then maybe DMT. Then after that, LSD will probably go make its way, and then eventually it'll get to maybe other things. But by that point, we'll be able to go and tell like genetically if you're susceptible to addiction, because there is a genetic component to just about everything.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize too that like as Aaron Jack I'm getting here, I honestly don't think this is the biggest deal in the world. Like if it becomes totally legal tomorrow in every state in all 50 states, I'm just not going to care that much. I mean, that's partially why I don't have a solid stance on this issue, because I really just don't care. I know that's what Crowder said and got Joe Rogan triggered, but I really just don't care that much about weed. I just don't give a shit. It's just not that big of an issue. I think it's degenerate. I think it's stupid, but I'm still the biggest advocate ever for freedom. Like I am, I care way more about freedom than anything. So that's why I just don't care about this, because I think you should be able to do whatever the fuck you want as long as you're not hurting somebody. But with certain things like marijuana, you gotta think about it a bit, and that's what I hopefully I'm trying to do here. I just I don't want to sound like I don't have a stance, because like I said, that's one of my pet peeves, but I just don't give a shit.
Well, yeah, and I think it's, like what you mentioned earlier about you not really having a stance. I don't think it should be a hill for conservatives to die on.
Exactly.
Like people, they keep like going out against like the Jeff, like not the Jeff Sessions, like the Mick Shockerson, what's his name?
Oh,
like
Mike
the
Pence.
Yeah, like I want, and Jeff Sessions too. Like I won't go and have that sort of like mentality, because it's not going to do you folks any favor when you go to get elected. But it's okay to go and have your principles, but on the other hand, you have to go and pick your battles. And I think marijuana's already won for the time being.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, like I just don't see most people caring all that much, because most of the boomers who really made a big deal about it are getting prescribed medical marijuana for their like arthritis. So they've gotten a lot more used to it.
Well, that's the same thing. Like, I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, it's a little bit of a tangent, but like, that's the one thing that's been holding us really conservatives back more than anyone, is they literally will die on a hill over the stupidest of issues. Like, for instance, gay marriage. Like, there are still some conservatives that are actively anti-gay marriage. I'm like, guys, it's been settled. Love it or hate it, just move on. This isn't a big issue. Don't die on this hill. But they're dying on this hill. Why? Because it's the religious right. They are, hamstrung with their Bible in one hand and their cross in the other, that they will not, accept it by any means. And it's like, you don't even have to be pro or anti-gay marriage to really realize that it's just silly to die on such a minute issue. I actually changed my stance on that, but my point being is that if you want to be successful in politics, if you want to be just really just successful in any form of politics, you can't worry about dying on the hill on stupid issues, on minute issues. You can't be so stuck on principles that you will not compromise on anything, that you will not pick your battles. It hurts your movement.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the gay marriage issue has a lot more nuances, but as for marijuana, I just think that one's completely dead.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go make a big issue with this. Just don't like a lot of conservatives. I wouldn't say smoking marijuana makes you a bad person at all.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I mean, I don't really think doing substances, as long as that's not what your life is about, I don't think that'd make you a bad person, because I've known people who've done all sorts of drugs who are fine people.
Exactly.
But then I've also known a lot of junkies in my life. I know people who did do marijuana who were bad people, but that's not because they did marijuana. That's because they made it into their life.
Yeah.
And they would go and like steal for marijuana. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's like Elon Musk is a great guy. Took a little puff. Okay. I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have done that at all. But, it's not going to make me hate Elon Musk. I thought what he did is dumb.
Oh, yeah, I agree. But, just to go and kind of summarize things, definitely marijuana, they just need to go and conquer how they're going to deal with transportation and find a way to go and, talk about the real facts about not just a bunch of fake news from both the right and the left. And, don't die on this hill. And for other drugs, possibly using a sort of medical, I think that one solution for, future drugs, because marijuana's already passed, would be the prescription recreational use model, where the doctor gonna monitor that. But yeah, just don't make it such a huge issue with marijuana, because people Like it's gonna happen, and you're gonna look like I don't want to say, like I really hate that term. Like you're on the wrong tree, but it kind of feels like that's gonna be the case with marijuana. Like we'll look back at it years from now, but I just generally believe in freedom. Freedom's always on the right side of history for the most part.